Good morning everyone and welcome to today's English lesson. Today we're going to be carrying on talking about pronouns, which is our topic for the week. So we started learning them on Tuesday. You did some excellent practice with them yesterday and hopefully some of you have already seen the class charts that I've added on. There were 10 people who managed to submit their work on Google Classroom. If you feel like you did it and you didn't get a point on your class chart, it probably means that you did the quiz and you forgot to say that you had finished it by marking your work as done on Google Classrooms. I did show you how to do that in the briefing video in the morning, so if you think you've missed that out, go back and check, see if you've done it, and hopefully you'll be able to do it tomorrow so that I'll be able to give you a class chart point for submitting your work. What we're going to do in today's lesson is, first of all, I'm just going to go through some feedback, show you what kind of answers people gave to the quizzes we had yesterday, and see if we can learn something, make an improvement, make sure that we're really confident on pronouns before we go on to today's writing task. So let's have a look at the first challenge that you had. So in this challenge you had to select from a list which words were pronouns. So I gave you a long list of words and I did intentionally put some things on there to confuse you. Now what you can see on this amazing graph is the answers that people gave. So this has tallied up everyone's answers in the class and you can see the ones in green were the correct answers. So when you were doing the quiz, hopefully you were able to spot the pronoun me, the pronoun it, the pronoun they, yours, her, mine, them, and him. And as you can see from this graph, you can easily identify which ones people found easy to spot. So a lot of people knew that me was a pronoun. So 26 people got that correct. The one that a lot of people seemed to miss was mine. And I can understand why you might have missed that because it wasn't on our original pronoun list. That's a new pronoun we can add to our bank. Mine is another pronoun that you could add on. And now if we have a look at the ones that people got confused on, now these are the ones we need to make sure we don't make mistakes with in the future. So the two names that were there, you can see the name Ash and the name Hassan. Quite a few people thought that they might be pronouns. Now perhaps you thought they might be pronouns because they're names of people, but we've got to remember that names of people are not pronouns. They are in fact nouns, and they're a special type of noun called a proper noun. Now I think some of you might have got confused because the word proper noun and the word pronoun sound very similar, so maybe you got them mixed up, but try to keep them separate in your head. The next exercise that I asked you to do was about taking a sentence and trying to replace the nouns with pronouns when a noun was repeated too many times. So this is what we're going to carry on doing today to make our writing better, is use pronouns to avoid having too many of the same noun in one sentence. So the first example, I put my hands over my face to stop my face twitching. You can see that the phrase my face has been repeated twice, so we needed to replace it somehow. Quite a lot of people realised that the correct pronoun to put in was it, so I put my hands on my face to stop it twitching, and that was a really great use of the pronoun it. It's correct actually. One person has put myself will put my hands over my face to stop my face from twitching. So what they've done is they've replaced this I at the beginning of the sentence. Myself is a pronoun that you can sometimes use, but remember it's not a common pronoun. We don't need to use it very often. And actually we didn't need to replace the word I at the beginning of the sentence because it hasn't been repeated. So that's something we can learn from. We don't need to change everything in a sentence to pronouns. We only need to use them when it's necessary. Somebody else did something similar in this sentence here. So it says, she put my hands over my face to stop my face twitching. So again, that phrase that was repeated, my face, this person has forgotten to replace one of them with a pronoun. And what they've done is they put a pronoun at the beginning. They've put she instead of I. So they actually swapped the pronoun I for another pronoun, she. We don't want to use pronouns to replace other pronouns. That's just going to get confusing. So remember, only try to use pronouns to replace other nouns in the sentence. Let's have a look at question number 2. Hassan dislikes music almost as much as Hassan dislikes PE. So hopefully some of you noticed that the word we need to replace is Hassan because that's the one that's been repeated twice. This person decided to replace the first instance of Hassan. So they've said he dislikes music almost as much as Hassan dislikes PE. Now the reason why this is a little bit confusing is where they put the pronoun he, I don't know who they're talking about. If I just read this sentence on their own, I would not know who this he is. So it's always better when you're using a pronoun to use it after you've introduced the noun for the first time. So instead of replacing this Hassan at the beginning of the sentence, we should leave that one in there so the reader knows who we're talking about, and put the he instead of the second Hassan over there. So I can see that someone's done that. They said Hassan dislikes music almost as much as he dislikes PE. And that sounds a lot better because now I know who we're talking about in the sentence. So remember, if you're going to put a pronoun in a sentence, you can only do it after you've first introduced a noun. So you must have the name the first time, and then you can put the pronoun the second and third time if you want to. Now this last one was quite tricky. It was a longer sentence. Ash was feeling nervous. Ash was feeling so nervous, Ash found even tying Ash's shoelaces difficult. Ash's best friend, Hassan, was worried about Ash. So we've seen the name Ash about 50 times. Well, not 50 times, but a lot of times in that sentence. So I want to have a look at this one. This was a pretty good answer. This person was really close. Ash was feeling nervous. He was feeling so nervous. So that person's used a pronoun here because we've already had the name Ash once. So we can replace the second time with a pronoun. He was feeling so nervous. Him found even tying his shoelaces difficult. So the next time they put a him there. Him doesn't quite make sense in that part of the sentence because he's the one doing the action. So we need to use the pronoun he again. So Ash was feeling nervous. He was feeling so nervous. He found even tying his shoelaces difficult. His best friend, Hassan, was worried about him. And here, the use of him is correct because it's somebody else who's worried about him. So just be careful that you don't mix up your he's and your hims or your she's and your hers. Well done everyone, that was quite a tricky exercise, but hopefully now we're learning about the best time to use pronouns in sentences. In a second, I'm going to show you today's exercise where you're going to be writing some sentences related to the drama activity that we've been doing in class this term. So hopefully all of you remember those scenes that you were doing with your partners about the child who goes to sleep in the night and wakes up and sees that one of their toys has come to life. And we're going to be using this same skill of using pronouns in our sentences to avoid repeating the nouns over and over again. And we're going to be applying that to writing a whole scene. Okay, so before I go ahead and show you exactly what we're going to be doing in our writing, we need to do a bit of a think and a brainstorm about what you're actually going to write in your scene. So I'd like you to take 20 seconds now to think back to the scene that you've already started rehearsing and practicing with your partner. Do you remember which character you played? And do you remember the character that your partner played? How does the scene start? What happens? What does each character do? So have a think, see if you can imagine it in your head and remember what your scene is about. Okay, I hope that's given you enough time. If you need some more time, just pause this video and carry on once you've thought of your scene. If you're sitting with your mum or dad or carer, maybe have a chat with them and remind yourselves of your scene. Explain to them what has happened in your scene so far. What we're going to be doing in today's lesson, and this is going to be your task that you'll see after you finish this video on Google Classroom. I've already put the date and I've already put the LI. The LI is to use pronouns correctly in narrative writing. We talked about narrative briefly on Tuesday, but in case you've forgotten, narrative is a type of writing which tells someone what happened or what is happening. So it's basically the storytelling part. The bit we came up with already is the direct speech. So we're not going to be working any more on the direct speech today. We've already got that bit prepared. But before the characters start talking to each other in your story, you're going to need to explain what happened. What did the child do? Did they go to sleep? How did they wake up? What woke them up? What did the toy do? What did the toy look like? All of this stuff needs to be in your narrative writing. So it's the description of what happened. In a second, I'm going to show you a scene between myself and my brother. We're going to be acting out our own version of a story. And then I'm going to show you how I write it down into sentences. So I hope you all enjoyed that scene. In my scene, the main characters, you didn't hear their names because obviously the beginning of the story, they're not talking yet. And it's the job of the narrator to tell the reader who those characters are, because obviously we need to figure out what their names are and what they're doing. So I'm going to now write my narrative based on this scene. The name of the girl, I'm going to call her Anya. So the first time that I mention her, I should not use my pronoun yet. Remember, first we need to use the name so we know later in the story who those pronouns refer to. So I'm going to start off by describing what was the beginning of the story. Well, at the beginning of the story, Anya was reading her book. So it was about, what time should Anya go to bed? Let's say it was about 9 p.m. at night, and Anya was finishing the last chapter of, now I could say of Anya's book, but I've already mentioned the name Anya, so now I can use a pronoun. So rather than saying Anya was finishing the last chapter of Anya's book, I could say Anya was finishing the last chapter of her book before bed. Oh, my face is getting in the way, you can't see my writing. It's about 9 p.m. at night, and Anya was finishing the last chapter of her book before bed. She, now I'm going to use another pronoun. Instead of saying Anya again, when I'm describing what she did next, I'm going to use the word she, the pronoun. She read one final page and then put her book down, and then, actually I don't want to say another and then because I'm going to make a run on. So she read one final page and then put her book down on her bedside table. It's good for me in the next part to try and use a different sentence opener because I'm talking about a sequence of events. I could use a sequencing word, so I could say, then she switched off her lamp and went to sleep. So you can see I've used she there again, and I know that the person we're talking about is still Anya because I've already mentioned Anya before. I don't need to keep repeating her name. Now I'm going to describe what happened next, where you'll see in the story, hopefully you've already seen it, that the robot came to life. Now the robot doesn't have a name yet, so we're just going to call it the robot. So in the night, the robot started to make strange beeping noises. When I want to talk about the robot in the next sentence, I don't need to say the robot's name again, or I don't need to refer to the noun, the robot. Instead, I can use a pronoun. And we don't know if the robot was a girl or a boy, so I can just use the pronoun it. It was coming to life. Slowly, so a different sentence opener, and again I'm going to use another pronoun, it started walking towards the bed where Anya was sleeping. Now you can see in this sentence I've used the name Anya again. And this is because we haven't mentioned Anya for some time in the story. So if I put a pronoun here, people might be confused about who is she if I just put the pronoun she. So instead I'm going to put her name again just to remind everyone that that's the name of the girl who was sleeping in the bed. So slowly it started walking towards the bed where Anya was sleeping. It, and we know it's the robot again because we've just been talking about the robot. Or I could, if I wanted to, I could mention the robot's name again just to add variety. The robot bent down and slapped her on the legs. Now, when I want to talk about Anya again, I can use a pronoun because we've just mentioned her name recently and it would be too repetitive to say her name again. Suddenly, she was jolted awake. What a surprise it was to see the robot standing there. And you can see that I've ended my little story, my narrative, with a lovely exclamation sentence because I like to practice my exclamation sentences. And I know it's an exclamation sentence because I've said, what a surprise it was. So I've put the verb at the end of the phrase to see the robot standing there. And now I've done a piece of narrative writing using lots of different pronouns to make my writing sound really varied and avoid repetition. And I've even narrated what was going to happen in my scene, or what's happened in the scene that I've invented. So now it's going to be your turn. If you are at home with somebody who can work with you, like a parent or a carer or a sibling, maybe you can have a go at acting out your own scene just like me and my brother did. That might help you to come up with some ideas of what you're going to write. Then, once you've acted it out, come back to this page, the narrative task, and fill in your story in full sentences using as pronouns in as correct a way as you can. So remember, you don't need to use pronouns the first time you mention someone's name or you mention a character or you mention a noun. But if you're going to be repeating it a second time, instead of repeating it, put the pronoun there so that your story isn't too repetitive. Good luck, and I really look forward to seeing what happens in your narratives and in your stories. I'm sure they're going to be very, very funny and interesting, or even scary to read.